joining us from. That will be very helpful for us to know our audience today. And we are excited today for this conversation. We will talk about the hidden delivery risk PMOs don't see until it's too late. In this panel event, we will find out how leading PMOs are forecasting change impact to project delivery confidence. And at the end of this session, we will understand why traditional delivery metrics miss human-led delivery risks. We will learn how to visualize change impact of portfolio, program, and team level. We will see how PMOs can forecast delivery risk before milestones slip, and we walk away with practical ways to strengthen executive confidence in delivery. But before we get going with the agenda for this session, let me introduce our panelists. First, I will start with Matt Dragon. He's the founder of Matai. Matai is a change management platform designed to help organizations embed change. He has over 20 years of experience leading major transformation programs globally as a change manager across sectors such as infrastructure, resources, energy, and property. And through Matai, Matt enables PMOs and change leaders and executives to visualize change impact, manage change load, and proactively address delivery risks to support the sustained outcomes. Thank you, Matt, for joining us today.
Thanks, Oscar. It's great to be here. Really
CEO of Matai North America, more than a decade of experience delivering large-scale projects and transformations across life sciences, healthcare, and energy. Kevin understands where traditional change approaches often fall short in environments of constant transformation. So, welcome, Kevin, to the session.
Oscar, happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you. So for the agenda today, we have a 60-minute session. We will have a panel discussions for about 45 minutes, and we will keep the last 10 minutes for Q&As, questions and answers. So in the chat, you can share with us your questions. We will try to answer all of them live during the session at the end. And if we don't have enough time to answer all of them, we will answer them offline, and we will send you back the answers, our comments, okay? So this webinar will be recorded, and we will share. It will be shared with you by email and by the socials. Well, so let's get started. I will ask some questions to know the insights from Kevin and Matt. And well, let's get started. So the first thing that I like to the first question for Matt is, Matt, you said projects don't fail because of poor plans, but they fail because change impacts collide. What does that actually mean in a real project, Matt?
Yeah, Oscar, it's a great question to start off with. And what we know for most organizations at the moment is they're going through really, really large volumes of change. Previously, transformation was looked at as a single program or a single event. For most organizations now, transformation is a constant within their business operations. And with transformation being a constant in business operations, organizations are facing significant challenges in managing the capacity of their people to absorb changes and to take on new ways of working. And what we've found historically is that PMOs have built up really good capabilities in terms of managing deliveries and managing schedule. They've been really good at building capabilities for understanding dependencies within schedules, managing budgets, and actually executing, tracking risks within execution. But after go live events, what typically happens is there's very little visibility or very little ongoing tracking of what's happening in the organization. And that's where the big risk lies at the point of adoption. And when you've got multiple changes happening in environments where of constant transformation, you get that significant risk of, people being or feeling overwhelmed by the volume of change, people not adopting new ways of working because they've got too much on or because they might have missed something coming down the line. So we really see that as the next evolution for PMO to extend the way they look at the organization and the way they look at their model from just being delivery focused to extending beyond delivery and to looking at what are the risks within the organization related to people that are going to impact the ability to realize benefits.
Oh, Oscar, you're on mute.
Sorry. Perfect. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for your answer. And I will have a second question that's for Kevin, maybe. Kevin, why do traditional delivery metrics miss the invisible layer of risks?
That's a great question. I think from my perspective, the gap is between typically what planned work do we have and then what work is actually experienced by individuals and teams. We talk a little bit about how change load, it accumulates, but it's invisible over time unless you really treat it as data, unless you're monitoring and tracking it. And so by the time it shows up in your delivery metrics, it's actually already potentially affecting your adoption or potentially even your morale in your organization. So more and more, we're seeing PMOs, they're actually looking to integrate adoption. They're thinking about stakeholder impact, and they're also thinking about change intensity. And how can we bring that into our governance and into our reporting? So said another way, I think it's a shift for PMOs. It's not just about delivery focus, but it's also really that human impact. So thinking more broadly than just traditional approaches or views of project or program management, thinking more about, well, how do we ensure the adoption success?
Oscar, I
Matt,
might add on, and I've got a bit of a visual to share just to help bring this to life of what Kevin and I are talking about. So I'll just share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay. So in terms of a traditional project management flow, and I know everyone on the call being project management professionals would be very familiar with this, but typically you start with your business case, your investment decision. What we know and what we're, I guess, describing is project PMOs being very, very good at that solution delivery window. So being able to kick off projects, being able to identify and understand the business problems that they're trying to solve, and being able to deliver solutions to meet those problems. What we know from the way most organizations look at change management at the moment is the change team works alongside the project team and they ready a business for a go live event. The interesting thing with what a lot of organizations are facing at the moment and what a lot of the research says is that the majority of financial benefit from transformations and from change investment is actually lost post go live. So the challenge here for organizations isn't about how do we deliver really good solutions. It's actually about how do we operationalize those solutions and how do we extract genuine value from the solutions that are delivered by the PMO. And then the other thing that we know is in organizations, our leaders are busy, and we talk about that space or that environment of constant change where there's a lot going on, as well as managing business as usual activities. And what we know as well from the research and our experience is that typically most projects within a transformation framework that come out of a PMO, they only capture the attention of leaders for 6 to 8 weeks after post go live. So you've got a very, very small window of opportunity to keep leaders' attention and to keep the organization focused on adoption. Now, what we describe after that is where we're going about the measurement and identifying collisions and continuing to measure adoption. What we're seeing with more mature PMOs now, they're stepping into this space where rather than it being a black hole where there's no visibility of impact in the business, there's no measurement of adoption, there's no tracking of the leading indicators associated with their targets. We're seeing mature PMOs and mature organizations start to track impact collisions so they can identify where there's capacity in the business for change. They're starting to measure adoption in a consistent way so they can actually use it as a leading indicator for their benefit realization targets. And they can re-engage with leaders if they need to, if adoption's slipping. And they're using operational metrics to feed their leading indicators so they can identify barriers. And what we're trying to do is, I guess, reverse this trend of failed benefit realization or failed projects and delays in benefit realization. So I hope that helps to articulate and, I guess, visualize the problem that organizations are facing.
Right. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Thanks for your answers. Thanks for sharing this insight with us. And my next question is open for both of you. How can PMOs start forecasting change risk before milestones slip?
Kevin, I might let you take the first crack at that, and then I'll share a sneaky dashboard that we use to help visualize it.
Sounds like a plan. So I guess in terms of forecasting before the milestones start to slip, I'd suggest gathering the data and visualizing it at a portfolio and a program level, but keeping an eye towards what's happening in departments and functions and at that team level that Matt was mentioning. I think if you can identify where, say, 3 or X initiatives are going to hit the same population, that simple mapping, it can help you to surface, well, there's overlap here, or there's significant saturation, or we're going to have some readiness issues that we need to prepare for. There was a little bit of an allusion to this earlier in the conversation, but we work with an enterprise that ran into this very issue. Everything from a program perspective, it looked great, and then when it was time to actually go towards implementation, it was a little bit too late because there was a realization that all of the programs impacted the same operational team within a roughly 60-day window. And nobody really saw this collision impact because the data lived inside each of the programs, not really at that portfolio level. So what ended up happening is they had a delayed adoption. There were significant escalations, executive frustration as well. And it wasn't because the PMO failed. It was just because the cumulative effect wasn't visible. So we were actually able to help them map that and change, or map the change impact, I should say, by teams across time. And then that insight was actually pretty immediate. Beyond visualizing it, I think if we can define and track those leading indicators, as Matt shared earlier, what's the engagement, what's the readiness, what's the capacity strain, that's the people side of change. That if we can anticipate that, we can anticipate the risks, we can mitigate it, and we can course correct.
Kevin, I think that's a great framing. I'm going to share a practical example of a client example that we've helped them work through. And when I say work through, we probably saw it done poorly by the client and then came in to clean it up. But one of the key differences between looking at PMO data and PMO milestones versus change milestones is considering the impact on people. And in the example that we were working with this client is they were doing a HRM or HRS implementation, a Workday implementation. And they had a technical go live date out of the PMO of the 1st of January. And that was a fine date to go live on. That wasn't a problem at all. And the PMO recorded that milestone as being achieved. The challenge is they did their end of year reviews, and they did not only their end of year performance reviews, but also their end of year bonus and remuneration structure in June. So the change team had prepared the organization for a technical deployment and a technical go live event in January. And by the time they got around to doing their performance reviews at the end of the financial year, being June for them, the leaders weren't familiar with the structure that was embedded in the system to basically manage the performance review process and to allocate bonuses. And they ended up exceeding their bonus allocation across the business by 150%. And I shouldn't say exceeding their bonus, they exceeded their salary increases, salary recommendation increases by 150%. So it had a huge financial impact as well as a huge impact on employees who went through a performance review process, but then were told that their remuneration and their salary increases that were promised had to be wound back, right? And that was all because the technical deployment was seen as a successful milestone, but the people impact and the deployment of that particular functionality within the HRS system was actually, I guess, it wasn't clearly visualized when that would impact the organization and the people. And so I use that example because it's something that most people can relate to. We've all been through performance management cycles. We've all been through, salary reviews as part of those. But when you think about how that relates to when a PMO is pushing out a technology and when the impact is felt on the people in the business, they're two very different time points. And so one of the things that we're starting to do, and I'll share another visual for you as well to bring this to life, is actually to map the impacts to the different people in the business. So I'll just share my screen and share with you a bit of a dashboard so you can get a sense of what that could look. Give me 1 second while I bring the slide up. But in the left-hand corner of this dashboard, or the left-hand middle section, what we have here is each of the functions of a particular business. And what we do is we map exactly when the different go live events are hitting those functions by particular weeks. So at any particular time, and this looks at a 3-month or a 90-day view, you can actually see when customer service, they're dealing with a total of 11 go live events in that 3-month period. And the heat map gives a different rating of those. So the idea is that you can move from technical deployments and PMO milestones to actually people impact milestones to get a better picture of potential risk and get a better picture and understanding of when adoption needs to happen. And in the example of the HR system, do we actually do training at the timing of when the system's deployed, or do we do training at the timing of when the user actually needs to interact and engage with the functionality within the system?
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Kevin. And well, moving forward, I'd like to ask you, what does it look like when change intelligence sits alongside schedules and RAID logs?
I can
Kevin,
Yeah, I can jump in with that one. Matt actually set me up pretty well because I was going to ask you to imagine a portfolio dashboard. He just showed you an example of one. So that worked out pretty well. Thank you for that. But if you think about a portfolio dashboard and it shows that delivery risk or that change saturation, it can allow you to really move those executive conversations, your sponsor conversations from, why did this slip, to how do we rebalance now and what do we do differently? Also, how do we improve our chances of successful implementation? So I think this really is the opportunity to move PMOs from reporting outcomes to influencing prioritization. It also supports really increasing that leadership confidence in delivery. And I think we would all appreciate that, having leaders more confident in our ability to execute and then also to realize those benefits. And then it also demonstrates to the people, the impacted groups, the change recipients, that the new products that they were thought of as we went through that process of, trying to make sure that this was successfully adopted and really put them first in the conversation. So that way it did ultimately deploy successfully, and it felt like something they were ready to take on, ready to adopt, and the business sees the benefits that they anticipated as a result.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Matt, would you like to share anything
I
else with us?
I don't think so. I think Kevin articulated that pretty well. I think there's, what we're seeing from executives in the organizations that we partner with and work with is they're looking for, are we going to deliver our projects on time and on budget? And that won't change. And that's a really important component that, PMOs do well. Most PMOs do well currently. The next thing they're looking at, and this is driven from a board level, or we're finding it's been driven from a board level directive, is, when are we going to realize the value from our investment in new technologies, and what does that value look like? And for senior execs, that's a really hard question to ask without getting a picture of adoption. And it's also, what's harder to answer is, what are the risks and how are we mitigating those? And so by tracking things like adoption and tracking the leading indicators, you actually create a governance around your benefit realization targets, and you're able to then identify and mitigate risks and deploy resources effectively to course correct if you need to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And the next question is, isn't change management already covered by change teams? And why is this a PMO issue? Matt?
Kevin, I'm going to let you start on this one as well, and then I'll chime in.
That's fair. I was actually I was just looking for the quote. I don't have it immediately in front of me, but it's to the effect of, change, the pace of change is accelerating, it's not slowing down, and we're going to continue to be inundated by change, both within our professional organizations, but then also within our lives. And so with that, I think PMOs are increasingly, they're being asked, can we handle this much transformation, this much change? It's a solid question from leadership, and it's not just a methodology question, it's more a data question. And so we're seeing in some organizations, the PMs, the PMOs, they're being asked to do more with less, as organizations are looking to become leaner or make use of AI. And sometimes they're being asked to take on elements of change management themselves, maybe with limited prior experience in the change space, and definitely without dedicated change management support. So I would say, having that data and the ability to look across a portfolio, being able to think about and take the perspective of the people that are ultimately impacted by the changes that are coming their way as the results of the programs or the products, keeping that in mind, it's really critically important.
Yeah, I think Kevin's raised a really good point. In the trends that we're seeing is because of the high volume of change, a lot of organizations are relying on project managers and the PMO to take on traditional change management responsibilities. And that's been due to a resourcing and in often budget allocation decisions and those type of things. It's a really interesting space for PMOs, but I probably look at it in the case that PMOs are being asked more and more questions and being held more accountable for value realization and not just project delivery. And as the custodians or those people and the place in the organization that's being held accountable for value realization, I think there's significant upside for PMOs to invest in their ability to understand change and to work with change managers if they have them available to paint a full picture around value realization. Because without the change data and without the people data, like Kevin mentioned, you can't get that picture and you can't realistically deliver what we're seeing executive teams are asking for and board level is asking for.
And if I can just one more comment on that, I don't necessarily think it's a PMO issue. It's a PMO opportunity. Thinking a little bit more about the added responsibility of the PMO to again think about not just delivery success, but adoption and ultimately the benefit realization.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We will continue with the next question is how does AI change the future of the PMO in this space?
I might kick off on this one. This is a really exciting area for us, Oscar. I think what AI is going to do for change management, it will enable change management to become easier to understand and easier to execute for those people that aren't traditionally trained as change managers. The great thing about AI is it enables you to extract and generate content for change management activities from traditional project management documents. So for example, one of the things that we're building into Mate, if you've got a business case that's been developed for a project, we can take that business case, we can ingest it into our software, and the software will automatically populate a benefit realization schedule for your outcomes, and it will start to basically recommend some leading indicators associated with that around adoption and around change success measures. So AI can take the specialist nature out of some of the key work, and it can also automate some of the workflows. We see it as really, really exciting because we see it as making change management more accessible to people who potentially aren't trained in change and who may not understand or be as familiar with traditional change management practices as people who are trained as specialists. The other thing that I'd mention with AI that I think is probably overlooked at the moment is change management. And I'll say this as a change manager has been traditionally thought of as light and fluffy and lacking hard metrics and lacking, I guess, quantitative measures of success and data. The thing with AI is AI will now enable you to access different data sets to provide more quantitative measures of success, especially around adoption and especially around things like engagement and also sentiment from employees around the volume of change within an organization. One of the really cool things as an example that we're doing from a use case that we're working on in the AI space is that with your meeting transcriptions from your Microsoft Teams meetings or your online meetings, we use the AI to basically review those transcripts, to identify and build out frequently asked questions lists, to inform training plans and training content materials, but also more importantly, to measure sentiment of the employee base at that point in time and to track that over the life of a project. So there's two components that we see AI adding significant value. Firstly is we believe it'll make change management more accessible for those people that aren't trained as change managers. And secondly, we believe it'll really unlock a significant amount of data and significant insights that can help inform and can really be used to drive benefit realization. Kevin, do you have anything to add? I know Kevin's our AI whiz. He's the guru in the business. So he'll probably have more than
I think you said it very well. One of the things that I think with AI is anybody that's had the opportunity to interact with it, you know that prompts are really important, but context is equally, if not more important. And the organization of that context is incredibly important as well. So how is your data structured? Is it centralized? Is it consistent? I mean, that's really going to determine how far you can take some of the AI insights. We're seeing a lot of trends towards data hygiene and analytics that AI can enable, catching things that others might, not necessarily catch or they might overlook. And that's one of the great things about having something, plugged in a portfolio change management platform like Mate. That AI can surface the emerging risk patterns like adoption or change fatigue, impact overlap, like we were talking about, the engagement overload. It can also automate reporting, which Matt, you didn't touch on this, but this is one of the things that's great about Mate at this point in time. We're able to, at a click of a button, after the data has been entered into the platform, create slides that are 85, 95% of the way there towards being ready for presentation. And that's on your branded template. So that allows the change managers or the PMs or whoever it may be supporting the development of that reporting to be able to focus on, I get my data in, I click the button, I have the report that I need or the document that I need to take into a leadership meeting. And I can focus my time and attention on those more value adding activities rather than on just constant slide refreshing or, working out of Excel files and things like that that don't necessarily talk to one another. So I think when you pair PM data and reporting with AI, it can really support what I'm seeing and hoping is an emergence in change intelligence.
Thank you, both of you. Those are very interesting answers.
Yeah.
And we can continue with this subject, but we have to move forward with another question.
Sure.
So thank you. And the next one is what are the early warning signs that a PMO has a hidden change risk problem?
Kevin, I'll let you go on this. I'm smiling because I know you've got some recent history with helping clients.
Yes, to Matt's point, I'm seeing a lot of this, and it's due to just the pace of change and how much transformation is going on. And again, that's tied to all the programs, the products that are being developed, the new technologies, the new ways of working that result, the asks and the expectation changes of those individuals. So common things that I'm seeing, it's teams reporting fatigue. It's repeated resistance, and that shows up in many different forms, sometimes very overt and sometimes very subtle. But we need to be conscious of that as well. And then there's also adoption gaps that surprise leaders. They think that, well, yeah, everybody should love this and should be ready to pick up and run with it, but that's not always the case. And when leaders find out about these adoption issues, they're not necessarily pleased with it. So how do we help them to overcome that and really try to flag that early? Those early warning signs. I also think that, and we've touched on this, that no single view of change across initiatives, across your portfolio. I mean, that's going to be pretty critical if you're going to overcome some of these early warning signs. There's also, like I was saying, that heavy reliance on manual reporting, and that's often comprised of stale data. You are spending a week working on a report, but then, you go out to, your leadership team and provide an update. And at that point in time, the data is only good as it was earlier in the week when you started that process. We're also seeing, and again, on that same point, just change you're spending a lot of time on manual creations to make sure those things are up to date, but we're not also seeing that drive adoption. It's it's taking them away from focusing on engaging with those stakeholders and driving towards adoption. So just a couple off the top of my head, those are some of the signs of impact and how impact is being tracked in silos rather than more strategically at that portfolio level.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, Oscar, there's an interesting question in the Q&A that I thought I'd address at this point in time as well, because it goes to the heart of measuring adoption. It's from Michelle. She said, how does PMO lead the effort to obtain data across an organization in order to measure adoption? Michelle, I think it's a really, really good question. The first thing that I would recommend a PMO leader to do is to implement a standard approach to measuring adoption. And that might take two or three different forms that is dependent on the type of project and the size and scale of the project that you're deploying or the solution that you're deploying and that you need to measure adoption for. But I think one thing that the PMO can do is provide a layer of governance on how adoption is measured. And by providing that layer of governance, while the PMO might not be the ones who are executing the surveys to test adoption or setting up, the walk me's within applications to get those metrics back, it can set the framework so that one, across all of your projects, you're using a consistent methodology to measure adoption. And then by using a consistent methodology and approach to measuring adoption, you can actually identify which projects are tracking well in regards to adoption measures and which projects are lagging. Because it's very, very hard usually if you're not using a consistent approach to get a baseline. So my advice there in terms of PMO taking the lead is PMO sets the governance and then change and the projects execute the adoption measurement. Great question. Sorry, I just saw that and Oscar, I just thought it'd be very timely to jump in.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. We'll continue. So, how can PMOs elevate executive confidence in delivery?
I might start with that and start by saying before projects start, PMOs, if they're able to provide a very, very good single view of change, they're able to provide executives a clear picture of capacity in the organization to absorb change and the risk that capacity or lack of capacity represents to project investment. One of the things that we're doing with the dashboard that I showed you previously was if we can identify which areas of the business are stretched or don't have capacity due to high volumes of change and which areas do have capacity, it can help executives basically make decisions early about where to prioritize expenditure and where to prioritize project delivery so that they minimize risk before they invest. So that's at the early stage of the life cycle. At the back end of the life cycle, we bring back to that adoption measurement. So by providing early indicators of adoption and tracking other early indicators or leading indicators associated with benefit realization targets, things like operational metrics that you can find, things like decommissioning of legacy systems that have the potential to erode value that's been realized. By tracking those things and reporting on those things, you can give execs a picture of where do the risks lie to value realization, but also where are we in relation to mitigating those risks. Kevin, do you have anything to add on that?
Yes, actually. My mind went to a previous client and a very senior leader within an organization, and they were talking about, we talk a lot about outputs. We need to shift from outputs to outcomes. And so I think that echoes and piggybacks on what you were saying, Matt. How can PMOs, how can we connect the change metrics like adoption to those business outcomes? Because I think that's where the credibility comes in, and it also hopefully increases the confidence in the ability to deliver successfully. I think it's the trajectory. I think it's team readiness. I think being able to understand cumulative impact across an organization and being able to prepare accordingly alongside the milestone progress. I think that's really important. I also think this further allows leadership to make investment decisions. They can sequence or resequence, they can stagger deployments, and they can do that with more foresight. So if we can make that value realization visible and not an assumption, I think that's really a compelling way to go about creating that or improving that executive confidence.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The following question is a very interesting one. So, is what differentiates high-performing transformation offices from reactive ones? Kevin, Matt?
Kevin, you can go.
Uh, I would say, I mean, we've touched on much of it today, but I think it's a shift towards, all right, well, we've traditionally worked in this way. How could we work differently? And that's both the PM side and the CM side, but working together as one. I know there was a comment in the chat about this, and I think having change involved early and having a seat at the table is incredibly important. I think some of that ties to governance, some of it ties to organizational structure. But beyond those items, I think in terms of what differentiates those high performing transformation offices and allows them to be more proactive versus reactive is having that quality data. So then it's real time and there's more transparency, which easier said than done it sometimes because people are protective of their data, of their information. And so that ties to democratizing data. I think that's important as well. Um, if you can have the governance that supports and ultimately integrates that change intelligence that we were talking about and not just focusing on project status and do I have a green indicator on this stoplight, but actually having the conversations about well, what is underpinning that we might be overlooking in terms of risk. I think also just being able to have things like reusable playbooks, that's consistency of approach. And Matt alluded to this earlier. One of the things we're focused on is how can we help people from all varying levels of change experience to do change well or support change well, because many people are asked to do that. I have the book, I think, on the shelf behind me, but it's Project Management for the Unofficial Project Manager. I think we see a lot of that these days. And so, how can we also think about change management for the unofficial change manager and how do we support them? Because at the end, they're not just managing projects, they're really thinking about how do we build enterprise capability around this. And that's what I see those high performing organizations doing.
Yeah, Kevin, I'll add one thing from a conversation I had this morning. I met with the Transformation Office Director or PMO Director of one of Australia's largest retail groups. And we're just having the conversation about where we see the evolution of her team. And she is considering renaming the PMO to the Value Office. So it's no longer Project Management Office. She's looking to rename her PMO the Value Office for the organization. And that expands their remit from delivering on budget on time to being accountable for delivering value and bottom line value to the organization. And I just thought it was a really, really cool way to communicate your vision and to commit to the vision for what value a PMO can deliver.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Before we move forward with the questions, the Q&A, I have one final question for you guys. It's if you would take one practical step next week, what should it be? So, Matt, Kevin, who want to start?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think as a PMO director, I always sit there and start to think about, okay, and Kevin articulated this very well. What are we doing today? And what is going to help us to get to the next step of evolution in the way we deliver value to the organization as a PMO? And so I don't think there's a universal next step that everyone can take, but I think the first step that you should be taking in looking at how to mature and how to evolve your PMO is actually to sit there and go, okay, what are we doing today? And let's do a gap analysis on where we want to be in the future. And then once you've done that, having a look and identifying, okay, what are the early wins we can do? And then what are the more longer term strategies that we need to put in place? And Kevin and I, we work a lot with clients to do that, where we help clients look at how do they mature their PMO to incorporate and embed change management in the PMO. And then the first step is always, okay, where are we now? And then how do we want to get to a place that is more mature and it has change management embedded in what we do? Kevin, do you have anything to add?
Yes, at the risk of sounding like a bit of a broken record, but also expanding on what Matt shared, I would suggest if you were to do this next week, look out ahead over the next 90 days and map the major impacts within your program or within the projects that you're supporting. And then you will, I think, quickly get a sense of when I look at the teams or the people, the ultimate end users of this, what's the cumulative load and where do I have potential overlap? Bring that into an upcoming sponsor meeting and update or when you're going in and providing a governance update. I think you'll want to be able to answer with confidence, not necessarily by anecdote or by instinct, but thinking about it, how can I come in with a structured portfolio level view? I think that would be really powerful. And that simple view, I think it can change your prioritization. It can also reduce surprises. It can strengthen that sponsor executive confidence that we were talking about. And I would say if you would struggle to map that next 90 days out, then that is the gap that Matt was talking about. That is the real opportunity here. So that would be my recommendation as a practical next step.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, guys. Anything else that you would like to add before we move forward with the questions, the Q&A, the questions we received?
I just, following on what Kevin says, I love the idea of having the penny drop conversations as a next step. So when you do sit with your COO or your CFO, have the conversation and use the example of, we do technical deployments, but the business doesn't have any visibility of the people deployments and when the impacts hit people. And to Kevin's point, if you can map that very, very simply as an example, it often results in a moment of, oh wow, okay, we actually need and can get value from doing this. Because it tends to be something that's hidden and off the radar because it's not currently reported on.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Matt. So if you agree, we will move forward with some of the questions that we received in the Q&A. So first, we have a question from Randy. He'd love to any advice on thoughts on how to address project delay due to client delayed feedback, change of direction, etc. with operations. So Matt or Kevin, who wants to answer?
Kevin, I'll leave you with that one.
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. I would say I don't think there's a silver bullet for this. If you have one, I'd love to hear it as well. Maybe Matt, you have a different perspective on this. But that's kind of the nature of business at times with so much going on with people that have different accountabilities. And I think, what truly matters to people will get done. And so if they can see the value, or if we can make it easier on them, the feedback process. So for instance, if you're trying to gather it through survey, maybe you shift to a quick interview and say, I'm going to put 15 minutes of time on your calendar to gather that information. If it's changes in direction, that can be more frustrating, but that also comes with the nature of things. And so capturing that in your risk register, making sure you're being very clear around the trade-offs and what's going to happen as a result of these delays, that is important. I think also one of the things that I've learned is you can't necessarily control it all yourself. And so leaning on your sponsor to have some of those tough conversations when the time comes. Nobody likes to, crack the whip or come down on people. But I think having that conversation with your sponsor, that is the role that they're there to play. So I'd suggest working through them to the extent that you can after trying to address it yourself, because my first recommendation would always be go to the source yourself. Try to have that conversation and get the outcome. If you're unable to do so, then that probably requires an escalation. Matt, what do you think on that one?
Oh, I think you said it well. There's no silver bullet to that. If I had a magic wand, I'd wave it. But I think we've all dealt with delays on client side, things that are out of our hands, unfortunately. And I think, being resilient in those situations and helping your stakeholders focus on where the risks are from delaying. It comes back to that old saying that, when you don't make a decision, you're actually making a decision, and there's consequences to that. So being able to shine a light on that in your role, I think is important. How you solve for that, unless you have decision authority, is very, very hard.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We have another question from Cheryl. Any recommendations for PMO tools to be able to produce centralized data seamlessly? Smartsheet, ClickUp, Monday.com. So,
Yeah,
Matt,
happy
Kevin?
happy to share on this. Cheryl, my comment on tooling is that most tools do one or two things really, really well, even though they might try to do 10, 15 things. So what I always recommend is really identify what your core need is. Is it for project management? Is it for portfolio reporting? Is it for change management? And go after a tool that is tailored to basically deliver on that challenge or the problem that you're trying to solve. It's the conversation I had this morning that I referenced, we were actually talking about tooling, and we were talking about the promises that a number of tools make around the breadth of functionality. But when you really, really drill down, most of those tools are good at, a handful of things, and they're good at their core functionality. But once they branch outside of that significantly, it really becomes a risk. So, I would say look at the tools closely, be really clear on what you're trying to solve with the tools, and go for the best tool that solves that particular problem without trying to boil the ocean and solve all the problems of the world. Sorry, I can't give you the magic tool. If you're looking for a change management tool, Mate is your go-to.
Thank you. And we have a couple of questions more. It's an anonymous participant. So first one, I feel change management needs to be included in PMO function. Change leaders should be included in the decision making. I see change management is engaged too late. How would we influence early
Yeah,
engagement?
I can build off that one. I referenced it when I was answering one of the other questions, but I think that this is something that PMs and PMOs that are very thoughtful will recognize the need to have change managers at the table early. And when I say at the table early, that doesn't mean that they need to be off to the races and spun up to do a lot of work straight away, but at least involved in the early conversation so they can scope what work they have or ask the questions to glean the insights that then will allow them to determine, all right, maybe I don't need to lean in right now, but in a month's time, it would actually make sense for me to start ramping up. Or now I can go off and have the conversations because this is a massive program and I'm going to need more resources to support this effectively. So I think it is a conscious choice by the PMs whether or not change has a seat at the table. I think it also is more of a strategic conversation if you can get the leadership within an organization and your PMO to really think more broadly about, well, how do we set ourselves up for success and beyond just the delivery metrics, but thinking about the adoption metrics, and having those be key components of value realization. I think that would be a critical way to go about this. And we agree with you that change management all too often is brought on too late and then asked to spin up very quickly and do a lot in a short period of time. And that doesn't really help set anybody up for success. So those would be just a couple of my quick recommendations.
Yeah, Kevin, I think that's great. Just to build on that and probably address the how do we influence early engagement. I think influencing early engagement is about understanding what value as a change manager you can bring to PMO when they're standing up projects. And to Kevin's point, it's about understanding, what are the things that the PMO need visibility of early in the process, in their process, and how do you get the data, the change data, and the people data to help inform their decisions? And when I think about the discussions that we've been having, if you can bring capacity information about your organization to the table when a project team is standing up their project plan and considering what are their key milestones and what is their deployment schedule early on, I think that can add a lot of value to their planning process. So that's one example of, how you can influence early engagement. I always go back to where can you add value early in the PMO or in the project management process.
Thank you. And we have a final question. It's a kind of long question, so I think it would be better if you, Matt, or Kevin go through the question and answer. It's like different pieces
Yeah,
and different questions. So yeah.
Yeah, so I can answer this one. Part of our tooling, we actually track project management time commitment to project delivery, and we also look at time commitment to other activities related to project and change. So I think, how do you recommend preventing overloading project managers? The first thing you've got to measure and understand their load. In addition to project managers, we often see business SMEs get regularly overloaded by multiple projects. Often projects ask the same people in organizations to contribute and input. And one of the things that we advocate for very strongly is how do you track that? How do you measure it? And how do you report on it so that you don't smash people? At the end of the day, we want to avoid overloading people because typically the good people get overloaded, and you don't want to burn them out. So I think that the key thing is how do you track it? How do you get a system that potentially tracks that for you? And once you're tracking it, how do you make decisions effectively to use your resources within the PMO? And that's not always easy. It's a bit of a juggling act. But if you've got the data, you can have the conversations about getting additional resources. If you don't have the data, it's very hard to justify needing additional project managers if your project managers are overloaded. Kevin, do you have anything else to add?
I think you touched on it. The PM capacity planning is important from a PMO perspective, and outside of Mate, that is something that ultimately I think it is again escalating and having some of the tougher conversations if there is overload. And I think the risk is that we try to take on so much from a quantity perspective, and then quality slips as a result. So if an organization truly values that quality, I think that's going to be something important that I would hope that can be raised and a thoughtful conversation can be had around it.
Perfect.
I just saw the last question pop in there about transitioning PMO to VMO. I love it, David, is what I think. I actually think it helps really articulate, and VMO, for those on the call who may not have heard the term before, is Value Management Office. It elevates what the PMO does for the organization, and it really positions the vision of the PMO to not be to deliver widgets, but to be to deliver business value. And I think if you're willing to take on the name of Value Management Office, I'd be a huge advocate for it because I think it helps you have greater conversations or higher level conversations with your executive.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. And before we go, any final comments, any final thoughts, Kevin and Matt?
No, Oscar, just want to say thank you for hosting for us. Really appreciate your involvement. Want to thank the PMO leader for having us on board. We've really enjoyed the chat and always enjoy engaging in these sessions. And yeah, look forward to if anyone would like to connect with us offline. I think Michelle has posted our details. So either connect directly via email or phone, or you can hit us up on LinkedIn. Those details are there, but just want to say thank you and enjoy the rest of your day, your evening, your afternoon, wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, we're
Thank you,
echoing
man.
that.
Kevin. Okay, perfect. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. And Kevin and Matt, thank you very much. It was very interesting and really helpful for, I think, for everybody in this, the participants in this webinar. So, well, we will stop now. Thank you very much and see you soon.
Thanks, Oscar.
Thanks.